All right, hey guys. I'm going to do a really short video today, kind of going over checks and balances. That's what we're doing this week. And so we've talked about that a little bit. It's been dispersed through our notes as we've been going over the first two branches. And so this will help kind of fill the gaps between the legislative and the executive branch and what we'll do after spring break, the judicial branch. And so checks and balances at its core is just one branch limiting the power of another branch to make sure that no branch becomes more powerful than the other two. So it's a pretty simple concept in and of itself because we know we've talked a lot about separation of powers and how we have our three branches. And now we got to talk about how they keep each other in check. All right. And so I've used this example before, but if you guys ever watch like hockey or like lacrosse or something, and you see one guy like come at somebody else super hard and then they knock him into the wall or knock him down, that's called a check. That player that knocked the other one down is limiting that player's chances of scoring or getting across the field or the ice, something like that. And it balances it out. And so that is what we're doing here. That's what we're talking about. And so one branch has a power to limit the other branch so that the power is balanced. And so we're going to talk through this little diagram really quick. And so we'll start with the legislative branch. So we see there's arrows going towards each branch. And in each of these green boxes, it's talking about the limits that the legislative branch has to check the other branches. So I really want you guys to get this down, that the word limits is going to mean the same thing as checks. So you can almost think of it as limits and balances, the same thing as checks and balances. And so let's start with how the legislative branch checks the executive branch right here. And so the legislative branch has to approve all presidential appointments. The Senate does that. We know that. It has the authority to bring impeachment hearings. Right? We know that. The power to override a presidential veto with a 2/3 vote. Control appropriation. So that's talking about like money. And then ratify treaties. So when the president wants to make a treaty with another country, we know the Senate has to ratify that. And then both houses of Congress have to declare war. So the president can't just declare war. So these are all ways in this green box that the legislative branch checks the executive branch to balance out the power. So now let's talk about how it does for the judicial branch. So the power to institute new courts. So that means, we know that's in our doodle notes, that the legislative branch has the power to create courts. So the Constitution actually only creates very few courts. Congress gets to do that. They have the authority to impeach. So that is part of the impeachment process. It's not all up to the judicial branch, even though it kind of sounds like it should be their job. It's not all up to them. And they have to approve judicial appointments. So we've heard of the Supreme Court. To be a judge or a justice in the Supreme Court, the president, the executive branch, nominates you. And then the legislative branch, specifically the Senate, they approve it. So that goes back to that approval power that the legislative branch, specifically the Senate, has. So now let's jump up to the executive branch. So the executive branch checks or limits the legislative branch by calling special sessions of Congress so he can ask them all to meet. He is the commander-in-chief, so once Congress declares war, he's in charge of the actual armed forces. And he can veto legislation or bills. He can say no to some of their law ideas, things like that. So that is how the executive branch limits the legislative. The executive branch limits the judicial branch by granting reprieves and pardons. Basically, that just means that if somebody has committed a crime or done something unlawful, the president can forgive them. That doesn't happen often, but the president does have that power. And he is the one, the president, the executive branch is the one that appoints or picks out judges to serve on the Supreme Court. So that's a huge check on the judicial branch. The president gets to pick who goes in there. And then, as we know, we already went over that one, the legislative branch has to approve it. Okay, so now Let's go to the judicial branch. I know we haven't gone over this. We're going to go over it after spring break, but this is a good little preview for y'all. So the judicial branch checks or limits the legislative branch by interpreting the laws to determine the constitutionality. So basically, they're trying to decide if the laws that the legislative branch has passed are constitutional, if they go with the Constitution. Okay, and then they serve for life. No other federal official has a lifetime term. Once the judge is put into that seat, the only way they are removed from it is if they either pass away, they retire, or they're impeached. And so now the judicial branch can check or limit the executive branch. They interpret laws and presidential actions, so they can interpret if the president is acting in accordance to the Constitution and upholding all his duties. They also are appointed for life by the president. So once the president puts them in there, they're not going to be done with their job by the time the next president rolls around. They're in there for as long as they want, essentially. And so that quick little chart, it can be kind of confusing, but if you follow the arrows and the colors, things like that, should be pretty easy. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll up to this activity I want you guys to do. So for this, there's 12 scenarios, okay, or 12 actions where one branch can check the other. All right, so what you guys are going to do is you guys are going to read all these. We'll do the first one together, and the only options for these blanks are going to be legislative, executive, or judicial. Okay, and so it's only going to be 3 of those because those are 3 branches. So in this blank, you're going to pick out and write or type what branch is checking or what branch is limiting the power in this scenario. So this first one we'll do together. Blank can veto a law passed by Congress. Blank can veto a law passed by Congress. So we know that the president can veto a law. So I'm going to put exec. I'm not even going to type the whole word, just exec. All right, executive branch. We know that that's the executive branch. So that's what you're going to do. And make sure you guys are referring to this little chart. I included another one as well, if you see it there, whichever one you like better. And then make sure you look at which boxes are bigger. So these green legislative boxes where they're limiting these 2 branches, they're a lot bigger than the other boxes. So a lot of these answers are going to be the legislative branch. So I want you guys to do this and turn it in by Thursday night, all right? And then keep working on your web quest. Please let me know if you have any questions. I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you soon.